My name is Dave Hollenbach, the host of From Embers to Excellence. My goal is to explore the many facets of leadership from the perspectives of some amazing people. In addition to leadership, I like to discuss mental health, PTSD, and overcoming adversity. If you have a favorite episode, I would love to hear about it. Message me through social media or my website, and I will share some free tools to help you achieve your goals. Please like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you haven't purchased your copy of my book, Fireproof, please grab a copy today. Thanks for listening. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Debi Silber. She is the founder of the PBT Institute, that is the Post-Betrayal Transformation Institute, and is a holistic psychologist, a health, mindset, and personal development expert, the author of Trust Again, and is a two-time #1 international best-selling author of The Unshakable Woman and From Hardened to Healed, The Effortless Path to Release Resistance, Get Unstuck, and Create a Life You Love. Her podcast, From Betrayal to Breakthrough, is also globally ranked within the top 1.5% of podcasts. Her recent PhD study on how we experience betrayal made 3 groundbreaking discoveries that changes how long it takes to heal. In addition to being on Fox, CBS, The Dr. Oz Show, TEDx twice, and more, she's an award-winning speaker and coach dedicated to helping people move past their betrayals, as well as any other blocks preventing them from the health, work, relationships, confidence, and happiness they want most. I had the opportunity or the good fortune of getting the links to her 2 TEDx talks and watched those recently. Definitely got to check them out. I'll have the links in the show notes. Dr. Silber, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to have this conversation with you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. And Debbie's fine.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you. So let's dig right in. Where were you born and raised, and what were some of your early influences?
Yeah, I was born in New York, and now I'm actually bi-coastal between New York and California. Every few weeks, I'm on a plane heading to one or the other. Early influences, I didn't even know it when I was younger, but I was a highly sensitive empath from day one. And when you don't know you're an empath and you just think you're crazy. You're like, why am I so sensitive? Why am I struggling with things that other people, have no, like, it doesn't bother them at all. I'd be the one who'd run for the lunch lady when the bully was bothering, somebody on the playground, and I'd be the one like escorting a bug outside. and I was the one who would always cry, like if I see a couple reuniting or a family reuniting in the airport. And, and I had no idea who I was. It actually took my betrayal for me to learn who I was, but we'll get to that.
So you grew up in New York. What part of New York did you grow up in?
Yeah, I grew up in Long Island, and I'm one of those people who was. It's like, if you know me, it just doesn't make sense. I seem like I really belong in California. I love nature. And New York has amazing nature as well, but I just put me by the beach in that relaxed attitude, and that just works just fine.
Now, do you come from a big family?
No, I had one brother, and that was it. Lots of cousins that I grew up with, and it was just amazing experience growing up with them.
After high school, did you go straight into college?
I did. I actually had a double major, broadcast journalism and TV, and minored in speech. And I really thought I was going into TV to do the production side of it. And even I was so into it. And being in New York, my last semester was all projects, and I would go into New York City and work for Good Morning America and news shows, and thought this was going to be my path. And I'll never forget how here I was working in TV after I graduated behind the scenes, and it just wasn't, there was something missing. And I realized I wanted to help people. I had no idea how, but I wanted to help people. And so I wanted to get into health. and didn't know what to do. Here it was, I have 10 years of school loans, and I'm like, uh-oh, what do you mean changing career at this point? And so I just got a job, and I'll never forget when my college roommate called me up one day and she said, "Are you bored?" I'm like, "You have no idea." She said, "Let's take a class." I'm like, "That's great. I don't even care what it is. Sign us up." And then she calls back. She said, "Let's take it towards something. Let's be dietitians." And I was like, all right. And so I signed up for an MSRD, so master's in nutrition and dietitian, and she never did. And what's even crazier is a similar experience happened a few years later, which put me on a different path. But so yeah, so I started in health, and then mindset, and then personal development. And then I had a really painful betrayal from my family. Thought I did everything I needed to do to heal from that. A couple of years later, it happened again. This time it was my husband. That was the deal breaker. So got him out of the house, looked at the two experiences thinking, well, what's similar to these two? Of course, me, but what else? And realized I never took my needs seriously. Boundaries were always getting crossed. So I'm one of those believers, it's like if nothing changes, nothing changes. So here I was, 4 kids, 6 dogs, really a thriving business. And I enrolled in a PhD program, and it was in transpersonal psychology, psychology of transformation and human potential. And while I was there, I did a study. I studied betrayal, what holds us back, what helps us heal, and what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive. And that study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my family, my work, my life.
Well, let's talk about those 3 discoveries. You talk about it in your TEDx talk, and I was looking forward to digging in. So
Yeah,
feel free.
sure. So originally I was studying betrayal and post-traumatic growth. And for those who aren't familiar, post-traumatic growth is sort of like if you can imagine, an upside of trauma, how that trauma, death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster, whatever it is, leaves you with a new awareness, insight, perspective that you didn't have. But I had been through death of a loved one, and I'd been through disease, and I was like, nope, betrayal feels much different to me. I didn't want to assume it was the same for everyone in my study. So I asked him, if you've been through other traumas besides betrayal, is it different for you? Does it feel different? Unanimously, they said, oh my gosh, it's so different. And here's why. Because it feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So the entire self gets shattered and has to be rebuilt. Think about it: rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust. They're all trashed. If you lose someone you love, you grieve, you're sad, you mourn the loss. You don't necessarily lose your ability to trust. So it didn't quite qualify as post-traumatic growth. It's like, yeah, you need to rebuild your life, but you also need to rebuild the self. So I coined a new term, post-betrayal transformation, and that's the complete and total rebuild of your life and yourself after an experience with betrayal. So the first discovery was that betrayal is a different kind of trauma.
I can't agree more. And it's interesting. I was just having a conversation because there are actually pieces of betrayal trauma. When you talk about PTSD
Mhm.
and the ACEs study, or the ACE study, where some of those early traumas, they're essentially betrayal trauma.
Mhm. Mhm. Very
Uh,
much so.
was any of your research related in any way to the ACE study?
I certainly looked at it, and one thing that was so obvious was, if you've had a betrayal in childhood, think about it, like your parent who's supposed to protect you, and they do something awful, then it's really common, if you don't deliberately and intentionally do the work to make some sense and meaning out of that, you move into relationships not because they're good, because they're so familiar, it's what you know. Yeah, so that was, yeah, so the post betrayal transformation was the first discovery, and really another, this brings up the second discovery, because when that's where you came from, and even if you didn't, and you've experienced betrayal, the second discovery was that there's this collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal, it's known as post-betrayal syndrome. We've had 80,000 plus people take our post-betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent they're struggling. A few things about that quiz I found so interesting. The first thing is, we've all heard time heals all wounds, right? I have the proof that when it comes to betrayal, that's not true. There's a question on the quiz that reads, is there anything else you'd like to share? And people write things like, my betrayal happened 35 years ago. I'm unwilling to trust. My betrayal happened 15 years ago. It feels like it happened yesterday. So we know you cannot count on time. You can't even count on a new relationship to heal betrayal. There is a specific and definite protocol you need to move through in order to fully heal. And what happens is, if you don't, you will find, and this happens all the time, you know, it's so often you go from partner to partner, friend to friend to friend, boss to boss to boss. And you're like, what the heck, is it me? Yes, it is. Not in that it's your fault, in that it's your opportunity. There is a profound lesson needing to be learned. Maybe the lesson is you are lovable, worthy, and deserving. You know, maybe the lesson is you need better boundaries in place, whatever it is for you. You know, you will have opportunities in the form of people to teach you. Like, look at my example. First, it was my family. Then it was my husband. And then for me to do something for me, which was so huge, enrolling in this program, I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know I was going to manage the time, but it was the first thing I had ever done big like that for myself. It changed my entire life. Lesson learned, you know?
Yeah.
So also with the quiz, I pull the stats every few months just to see where people land. I'm happy to share them if you want to hear some stats.
Yeah, that would be great.
So, okay. So now imagine this is men and women. Just about every country's represented here. And out of 80,000 plus people, 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 80% are hypervigilant. And that's just exhausting. 94% deal with painful triggers. The most common physical symptoms: 71% have low energy, 68% have sleep issues, 63% have extreme fatigue, so they wake up, they're exhausted. 47% have weight changes. Maybe in the beginning they can't hold food down. Later on, they're using food for comfort, really common. 45% have a digestive issue, and that could be anything: Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, you name it. The most common mental symptoms: 78% are overwhelmed, 70% are walking around in a state of disbelief, 68% can't focus, 64% are in shock, 62% can't concentrate. Now think about this. You can't concentrate, you have a gut issue, you're exhausted, you still have to work, you still have to raise your kids. That's not even emotionally. Emotionally, 88% experience extreme sadness, 83% are really angry, 82% feel hurt, 80% have anxiety, 79% are stressed, just a few more. Here's why I wrote the book Trust Again. 84% have an inability to trust. 67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how.
One thing I was wondering, because I've seen this, and I'm wondering if you are familiar with any statistics around this, but you know, for those that have experienced betrayal trauma, how likely are they then to perpetrate a betrayal on somebody in their life?
Yeah, you know, it goes either way. You know, I've seen it where it's like a revenge kind of thing, where they just want to betray the person who betrayed them, sort of thinking that that's going to make them feel better. And I always caution people with that, because you're not thinking from a clear space and it's forever on your resume. So be careful about that move. But not necessarily. You know, what happens so often is you either stay stuck, and this really gets me to the third discovery I'm happy to share. So often we stay stuck, and we're just not necessarily betraying others, but in a really stuck, sad, sick space. Or we move through all of it and completely transform. The opportunity is there. And just to wrap up the quiz, you know, you heard those numbers. I didn't read anything, you know, 20%, 30%. These numbers are really, really high. What's, to me, even more tragic about these numbers, they're not necessarily from a recent betrayal. This could be from the parent who did something when you were a kid. This could be from the girlfriend or boyfriend who broke your heart in high school. So think about this. That person may not know, care, even remember. They may not even be alive. And here we are walking around with these symptoms because of something that happened decades ago. And then what happens is we're medicating and trying to suppress the symptoms, but we're never getting to the root. The root is the unhealed betrayal.
And you talked about a protocol to heal from this. Do you write about it in your book? Are you willing to share a little bit about it?
Yeah, of course. That's the third discovery. So this to me was the most exciting out of all three of the discoveries. And what we learned was, while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many people do, if we're going to fully heal, and by fully heal, I mean symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome, like I just shared, some, all, right, to that completely healed place of post-betrayal transformation, we're going to move through 5 now proven predictable stages. And what's even more exciting about that is we know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every single stage. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. Healing is entirely predictable. And I'm happy to share the 5 stages if you want to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because it would be really awkward if you said no. So they're all mapped out again in Trust Again. It's what our coaches are all certified in. It's what we do within the PBT Institute. We just simply move people through the stages, but here's sort of a boiled down version right here. So stage 1 is like a setup stage. And if you can imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with every participant, me too, was a real heavy lean on the physical and the mental, thinking and doing, and kind of neglecting or ignoring the emotional and the spiritual, feeling and being. Well, think about it. If a table has only 2 legs, easy for that table to topple over. That's us. Stage 2, the scariest of all of the stages: shock, trauma, D-Day, discovery day. And it's the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. Right here, you've gotten the news. You cannot wrap your mind around what you just learned. This makes no sense. You've ignited the stress response. You're headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete and total state of chaos and overwhelm. Makes no sense. And your worldview has just been shattered. Your worldview is your mental model, the rules that govern us, that prevent chaos. Don't go there. Trust this person. This is how life works. And in one earth-shattering moment, every rule you've held to be real and true is no longer. The bottom truly has bottomed out on you, and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. So this is terrifying. But think about it. If the bottom were to bottom out, what would you do? You'd grab hold of anything you could to stay safe and stay alive. That's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's by far the most practical out of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this experience? Where do I go? Who can I trust? Like, how am I going to feed my kids? It's practical. Here's the trap, though. Stage 3, by far, hands down, is the most common place we get stuck. And here's why. Once we've figured out how to survive our experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where we just came from, we think it's good. We're like, okay, I got this. And because we don't know there's a stage 4 or stage 5, transformation doesn't even begin until stage 4. But because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we start planting roots here. We stay here. We're not supposed to, but we don't know that. And 4 things happen. The first thing is we start getting all these small self benefits from being here. We get to be right. We get our story. We get a target for our anger. We get sympathy from everyone we share our story with, and you get a whole bunch of benefits. So we plant deeper roots. We're not supposed to, but we don't know. Now, because we're here longer than we should be, now the mind starts doing things like, well, maybe you're not all that great. Maybe you deserved it. Maybe this, maybe that. So we plant deeper roots. Again, we're not supposed to stay here, but we don't know. Because these are the thoughts you're thinking. Well, this is the energy you start putting out. Like energy attracts like energy. So now you start calling circumstances and situations and relationships towards you to confirm, yep, this is where you belong. Like the misery loves company crowd. They come around right here. They love this. It gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad, but we don't know there's anywhere else to go. Right here, we resign ourselves. We're like, this stinks, but like, I have to get through my day. I have to raise my kids. So right here, we start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, anything to numb, avoid, and distract ourselves from what's so painful of a space to be in, right? So think about this. We do this for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. I can see someone 20 years later and say that drinking you're doing, that numbing in front of the TV, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they would look at me like I'm crazy. They would say it happened 20 years ago. All they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stay there. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. And that's where most people live. And that's why, while Trust Again maps out the 5 stages, has my story in it, the whole thing, I wrote From Hardened to Healed just for stage 3, because you've been through the worst of it already. You owe it to yourself to move through the stages. Don't stay stuck there. But that's where the majority of people, after an experience with betrayal, or just even, a negative experience, that's where they land. That's where they live. Anyway, if you're willingness is a big word right here. That's the most important needle mover. Willing to let go of the small self benefits and everything you get from them. Grieve, mourn the loss, bunch of things. You move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. So here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo what happened, but I control what I do with it. Right there in that decision, you turn down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but at least you stopped the massive damage you've been creating in stage 2 and stage 3. Stage 4 feels like if you've ever moved. If you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, your stuff's not all there. It's not quite cozy yet, but you're like, yeah, okay, all right, we got this. It feels like that. But what's so interesting to me about stage 4 is if you are to move, right? If you were to move, you don't take everything with you. You don't take those things that don't represent who you want to be when you're in that new space. And what I found was if your friends weren't there for you, right here in this one spot, you've outgrown them. If they don't rise, they don't come. People say to me all the time, what the heck? I've had these friends all these years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation. And if they don't rise, they don't come. Anyway, when you're in stage 4, you're settling in there, you're mentally making it home. You move into the 5th, most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal. Self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise. You didn't have the room for that. You didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. Now you do. The mind is healing. You're making new rules. You're making all kinds of new boundaries and assessments based on the road you just traveled. And you have a new worldview based on what you see so clearly now. And the 4 legs of that table, in the beginning, it was about the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
One thing I couldn't help but notice is there's a lot of similarity in there to healing from PTSD and a lot of the symptoms. I would say that really post betrayal trauma is is it often confused with PTSD?
People just think, for the most part, many people feel that PTSD is limited to like a war vet who hears a car backfire and they feel like they're back in battle. PTSD is so common with betrayal. You're triggered and you're reminded of an experience and your mind is hijacked. Your body is responding as if you just got the news. And cognitively, you're like, no, I know it's not happening now, but tell that to your body because your body feels like it's just happening all over again. Yes, very common to experience PTSD symptoms with betrayal. The good news is you can heal from all of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know that we got to wrap this up. Before we go, what is the best place for people to connect with you, buy your books, learn more about what you do, and maybe enlist your services?
Yeah, thanks. Everything is really at the PBT, as in post betrayal transformation, thepbtinstitute.com.
All right. Well, I will have the link in the show notes along with the links to your TEDx talks. For everybody listening, please check out our website and check out those TEDx talks. Incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of From Embers to Excellence. Please visit hollenbachleadership.com for additional content, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review.